All right, guys. There was a fourth exchange between Rava and Rabba Bar. We learn a source for this thing that people say. There's a proverb: poverty follows after the poor. Now, before you say this is obvious, I mean, where's poverty going to fall after the rich? It's obviously going to follow the poor. But what do we mean by this? Rava's basically Rabba Bar is saying to Rabba, look, we learn this in a Mishnah. If you have a look in Bikurim, in chapter 3, verse 8, what is it talking about? It's talking about the wealthy that bring their Bikurim to the temple in baskets of gold and silver, while the poor bring theirs in baskets of peeled willow twigs. So basically, what happens is the poor would give the baskets and the Bikurim to the Kohanim, but the wealthy would keep their baskets. So I learned this from Rabbi Stern at Sitnam Shul, funny enough. And what used to happen is the first ripening fruits of any of the 7 species, which are wheat, barley, olives, dates, grapes, figs, and pomegranates. The Torah's big 7 that are in Eretz Israel, they brought to the temple where certain rites are performed, and they are given to the Kohanim. So it would seem on first looking at it that the poor would get poorer, because what happens is their baskets would be taken while the wealthy would suffer no loss, and their baskets would be returned to them. But if you have to analyze it, it's a little bit different. Why? Because their baskets weren't made of anything of value. They were made, for example, of reeds. I don't know if you've ever seen when reeds are interwoven. You get those wicker baskets. I don't know if you guys have seen where there's fruit and things like that. Or people have those cane wood chairs. So it's not a expensive product, and that was taken along for the Kohanim, whereas the very wealthy people would have baskets of silver and gold, and those would have to be returned to them. So it seems like the poor get poorer because their baskets are taken, and the rich get richer. But the real thing of it is it's not like that, because Rabbi Stern said that Hashem loved the offerings of the poor so much that he wanted everything about it, their baskets, their fruit offerings, because for them it meant so much more. It's equivalent of a poor person giving 1,000 rand or a super millionaire. It's not seen on the same level in terms of what it cost the person. So what happens is Hashem actually gave a message to the rich people saying, I don't need your gold and silver. What are you giving it to me for? I've got untold wealth. I don't need those things. Take them back. It's not acceptable here. Your offerings, your fruit offerings are acceptable. And obviously, the wheat, the barley, etc., are acceptable, but certainly not your container. So there's a difference between the first glance of it and the deeper glance. Rava said there's an earlier source, because you can look at it in the Mishnah, or you can say in the actual Torah. And if you look at it in the Torah, it says with regard to Matzorah, that to prevent other people from becoming contaminated through him, he should announce himself. He is to call out Tameh Tameh. So not over. So what it's saying is, what happens is, Rav is saying that there's a cycle. What happens is poor people become poorer, meaning you can interpret it from the Mishnah and Bikurim that their baskets are not even returned to them. But what I'm saying is, Rav is saying is there's a deeper principle, is that the poor get poorer and the rich get richer. Why? Because when the rich have assets, they're able to generate more assets from those assets, and so they can build and grow. But if a person doesn't even have money for Google ads, even if they got the best product, they're never going to get out of their hole. I'm just using that as an example. You don't have money for advertising, you can't get off the ground. So it's saying, Rav is saying, look, we want to look at a person that's got sarais, a Matzorah. And not only is he embarrassed because he's in Chayrim and he can't mix with the rest of the community, but he has to always publicize himself and say, I'm Tameh, I'm Tameh. And that calling out is embarrassing himself. So not only does he have to stay outside the city limits, but he has to declare, I'm impure, I'm impure. And what that means is that he's declaring his embarrassment as well as being embarrassed. So that's a proof that sometimes when you get yourself in a sorry situation, it's very difficult to get yourself out. Do you get what I'm saying? So there's another exchange. Rabbi said to Bar Murray, where can we learn this thing that the rabbis say, eat early in the day, in the summer because of the heat, in the winter because of the cold? And in a similar vein, what's the source for that which people say 60 runners ran but did not catch the person who broke bread in the morning? So all it's saying is that it doesn't mean literally that there's a number 60. We use 60 in terms of kashrut, that if you drop milk in a pot of meat and it's 1/60th, it's such it's a fractional amount. But if you do it the other way around and you say there's 60 people after you, it's almost an hyperbole to explain that it's a great number. So when you say, listen, there's 60 people that couldn't catch up to you, it's basically saying that if you eat in the morning, it's going to protect you in the summer heat and in the winter because of the cold. So that you should get up early and break bread in the morning, meaning that it's a certain recipe for good health, as opposed to eating late in the day, because the word breakfast, what does the word breakfast comprise of, Arthur, if you break it up?
Right.
Arthur knows this.
Breakfast.
Exactly. Arthur knows this because he feels better in the morning because his blood sugar shoots high. And what happens is it's a break from the fast with diabetics, that it actually can help them, as well as exercise, etc., where their blood sugars are stable. So one's got to be, whereas with me, it's a very, very difficult thing. So breakfast is a break from the fast. So that's immediately when you should get your stamina. But Rabbi Bar Murray doesn't agree with Rav in terms of the source, because he said they shall not hunger nor thirst, and the heat of the sun shall not strike them. Meaning, what do you mean the heat of the sun not strike them? It's basically saying, look, there's two things. There's a winter and a summer. So the winter sun is obviously not very strong, so it protects them from the cold to eat in the morning. And in summer, if you drink adequately and eat adequately, you're protected from the heat. So Rava suggests another source, and he says, look, you tell me a source from there, and where's his particular source? Isaiah chapter 49, verse 10, because there's a parallel Gemara in Bava Kamma 107b that basically said that you won't, it's not that there won't be heat or cold, but you won't be affected adversely from them. So you should see there's a pattern, because Rabbi Bar Murray always quotes generally from the Tanakh or Ketuvim or whatever. And who does Rabbi quote from, Kevin?
Rav, I don't know.
Rabbi, the Chumash. We see in every case where there's a later source, Rabbi says, I prefer to get my sourcing directly from the Chumash. It's always better to get a direct source than to go to the Gemara or the writings or Tanakh. The earlier the source, the more that lays the foundation. So if we look at all that underplaying from Jacob and his sons and the tribes, they all started from Avraham Avinu and Yitzchak and Yaakov. So they build what you call the pattern of what's going to happen to come. So we explained with Benjamin and Yehuda that the forging of Yehuda's protection of Benjamin worked out that when you had the 12 tribes of Israel, Benjamin followed Yehuda. So it leaves a pattern. So Rava says always get it from the source. What's his source? You shall serve Hashem your God, meaning it's in Shemot chapter 23, verse 25, and that refers to the recitation of the Shema and to prayer. And the verse continues, and he will bless your bread and your water, and that refers to the morning meal, bread with salt and a pitcher of water. From here on the conclusion of the verse I apply, I will remove sickness from your midst. So when you read that, and you read that pasuk, it's showing that if you drink adequately and you eat adequately in the morning, you're going to be far healthier. And the idea is supported in the same brisa, because if you go to there, it says God will remove sickness, and it refers to the bowel of the gallbladder. So the gallbladder obviously retains a lot of the toxicity of the body, as well as the liver, etc. And God will protect a person against the sickness caused by excess bile secretion by the gallbladder, whether it's feces or urine, etc., in the kidneys. So when the gallbladder produces an excess of bile, it spreads throughout the body, and that's what makes a person sick. That's what we learn in our commentary to Rosh in Bava Kamma 107a. Okay, so obviously when it refers to drinking water, because water is you need that fluid against the heat, and it says here that wine is certainly beneficial. Now, the reality is, I think it depends on your body. It says the Gemara says, look, why is it called sickness? Because 83 sicknesses are associated with the gallbladder, and the numerical value of the word machala is equal to 83. So all it's doing there is it's going through certain gematria to prove the point, right? So the Brisa bottom line concludes, eating bread with salt in the morning and drinking a pitcher of water serves to neutralize them. And the Gemara does mention that you should mix it with wine, or you can have wine, etc. But again, it depends on your body. If I have wine first thing in the morning, that's it for the day. There's nothing left of me. So it's obviously talking about a normal person. But interestingly enough, my father's wife, who's Italian, they often have wine with meals, and it's shown that if you have a little bit of alcohol in your system, it can have some positive results if you grew up with alcohol. I'm not saying somebody is an alcoholic, but olive oil and things like that, and wine. These things definitely have a beneficial effect, but I think you have to grow up with them to a certain degree. So it certainly neutralizes the ill effects of the bowel, of the gallbladder. Now, there's a 6 exchange between Rabba, who said to Rabba Bar Murray, where can we learn the source for a saying that the rabbis say, if your friend calls you a donkey, take a saddle of a donkey and put it on your back? So the first time I learned this, I laughed. There's a saying, guys, that says, listen, if one person calls you if one person calls you a donkey, there's an English saying, don't believe him. If 3 people call you a donkey, you're going to start to just look in the mirror. If 20 people call you a donkey, you buy a saddle. Which means if Jack's got a problem with everybody in the world, who's the problem with? With Jack.
Jack.
He's a jackal. Yeah. So what we're saying in a nutshell is that if somebody is saying to you that you're a moron, you're a donkey or whatever, that's something we don't take seriously. But if they say you're a stingy person, you've got to look at whether this person's well or mentally ill. It could be that the person's mentally ill and is just projecting his own thing. But what happens is that if you hear some feedback, what you've got to do, according to Rashi and Meiri, is that when you get a certain nickname or more than one person calls you that and you're verbally attacked, that the criticism should be used as some redeeming value, even if it's a complete stranger. Why? Well, the first remedy, it says here, according to the Meiri, is you don't counterattack. What you should do is keep quiet. Now, it says in Shabbos in 88b that obviously you don't have to react badly, but then again, the commentaries also say that you shouldn't be open to abuse. If a person continually verbally abuses you, you can put your boundaries up and say that's not acceptable. But what this is saying is something completely different, is that if there's a criticism that comes to you, and especially if it happens more than once, you've got to look at your nature and figure out 2 things. Is this a valid criticism, or is there something in me that might have had a little bit of validity? Why? Because if you look at this case of King David with his general Shimi ben Gera, okay, it's in the 2nd book of Samuel in chapter 16, verse 10 to 12. He's cursing because Hashem said to him, curse David. Let him curse, for Hashem has told him to curse David. And perhaps Hashem will see the tears in my eyes, and Hashem will repay me with goodness instead of his curse this day. So the Gra explains that it's not one's fellow man who insults a person, it's one's sins that insult him. And that is we just did it in Yevamos on 121a in Daf Yomi. I didn't do it personally, but this did come up in the shul, that your own sins insult you, meaning somebody can't bring up something bad in your character if there's no validity whatsoever. So what you've got to do is also see that a person should place a saddle upon his back. In other words, he should face the calamities with acceptance and know that Hashem caused this message to come about, instead of cursing his assailant to disappear. But you're not obligated, and you're not have to be available for ongoing verbal abuse. That's for absolute sure. So Rabba Bar Mari replies. He said to Rava, "It's written, the angel said, Hagar, maidservant of Sarah, from where have you come and where are you going?" He just did it in this parsha, and she said, "I'm running away
It is
from
this
Sarah."
week's parsha.
Exactly, from Sarah, my maidservant.
But yeah.
Sorry, Sarah, my mistress. So what happened was as follows: is there was a case. Also, I don't know if you know this, that Sarah couldn't fall pregnant. So
Yeah.
Sarah suggested that Hagar, that Avram cohabit with her maidservant Hagar, and she bore a child immediately. Then Hagar became arrogant and said, "Well, my mistress isn't as righteous as she should be, otherwise she would have fallen pregnant." Now, Sarah was very upset about this and said to Abraham, "This is your fault. Let Hashem judge between me and you." I think there was a punishment there for her for that. I'm not sure what it was, but the thing of it is she was genuinely upset. And Abraham said, "Look, she's my wife, Hagar, or even though she was like a concubine, she had the status of a wife. Therefore, I've got no issue with it. It's your issue with her. But if you want to work her hard and teach her a little bit of humility, just to let her know her station in life, you can do so." Anyway, Hagar was accepting none of this. Now, first thing you've got to realize that Rabbi Goldschmidt said is that Sarah was not punitive. She never decided to, because her feelings were hurt, to punish Hagar. There's an opinion to state that in fact she was not treated any worse by Hagar. Sarah did not treat Hagar any worse, just that now Hagar saw herself in such a higher status, she wasn't prepared to be a maidservant anymore. She said, "Listen, I'm not taking this what I've taken all this year." So it's not like Sarah put more of a workload on her. Hagar thought it was beneath her now to do Sarah's work. So she left. What happened was that there was a malach, an angel, who said, "Hagar, maidservant of Sarah, from where have you come and where are you going?" So who addressed her as a maidservant of Sarah? The malach, the angel. And Hagar realized she made a mistake because she said, "I'm running away from Sarah, my mistress." Meaning, the angel addressed Hagar as a maidservant, and Hagar could have objected to that title, since that's exactly the reason that she fled from Sarah in her service. Instead, she actually accepted the description, as seen in her response when she refers to Sarah as her mistress. And that was one of the reasons that her prayers, I think, were accepted with regards to Ishmael, because she accepted her wrongdoing. So in other words, what's interesting now is Rabba Bar Mari now is referring to the Chumash. It's interesting. So he's learning with Rava and using his approach. So now Rava's learning from Rabba Bar Mari and says, "All right, let's take a newer source." And Rabba Bar Mari is saying, "Let's take an older source, a Chumash source." So it's interesting how much respect they've got for each other, that they're using now an opposite discourse. Does that make sense, guys? So the seventh exchange, Rava said to Rabba Bar Mari, "Where can we learn a source for this thing that people say, if you have a fault, bring it up before anybody else can?" Rabba Bar Mari said to him, "For it is written in regard to Eliezer, when we began speaking to Rebekah's family, he said, 'I am the servant of Abraham.'" So what happened was, Eliezer didn't try and hide the fact that he was a servant at all. In fact, he stated it immediately when he matched Isaac with Rebekah. So what happens is, what happens there is that basically, it seems to be a contradiction between this adage and the previous quote, right? Because the first one is it's saying we shouldn't, although we should take it seriously when somebody criticizes us, we're not under any obligation to necessarily bring it up and announce our flaws ourselves. There's two different situations. The one is to concede the point. If somebody believes he's got a genuine flaw, you can bring it up first. But if a person believes that he does not have a genuine flaw, this is what we mentioned before, there's nothing to bring up. But if his fellow accuses him of a flaw that he doesn't believe he has, he should at least concede to the judgment of his fellow and admit to the flaw despite his own beliefs. That's in the Ein Yaakov, which means he might not believe it, but at the very least to himself, he might say, Hashem sent me this message. If he's on a higher madrega, he should say to the person, I have got that part of my character. It's not as strong maybe as you think it is, but it's something I need to work on. But we're talking the first case where a person's completely astounded at being called a donkey. In other words, it's that much of a shock to him to be called this. So we're saying you've got to be open to Musa. But the second one is talking about when you know you've got a flaw, but bring it up first. And Arthur and I learned a sales technique way back in the day. I think wasn't Ari Gelper, it was somebody else, Arthur, that said if you've got every product and every service has got things in it that are flaws. In other words, you can't be strong in every arena. So what you do is you bring up that sales objection first to the client and say, listen, I know there are cheaper people out there on this particular product that you're looking for, but there's quality. If you want to buy a cheaper, it's not going to last very long from China. If you want to buy something of quality that will last for 15, 60 years, you buy an Austrian watch. You don't buy something from China. So it is more expensive, but this is the reason. But if the other person brings it up first, you're now in the defensive in the sales. But, oh, you're so expensive, it's better quality. But already the guy has made up his mind and you're defending yourself. It's like boxing. The first thing you should do is attack. My father taught me attack is the best form of defense. Be the first one to bring it out and have ingratiating humility. And in that way, people won't attack you for it. So Eliezer knew his station. He didn't try and say, listen, I'm a big man. He said, I'm the servant of Abraham. I'm here to create the shidduch. So they're not contradictions of each other, the statement. The one is if somebody brings up a statement where you think is completely unfair. And the other one is when you know you've got a flaw, just to admit to it and have the humility to learn from it, even when someone criticizes you. Okay, so